A very diverse group of men who are developing here in Houston, and what we call this is Developing Houston 2013. And I think without a question, we would say, not just pridefully because we're here, but we'd say without question, Houston is the hottest market in the country, bar none. And these men right here are a big part, up to their elbows in terms of development, buildings, land, all the above. And I'm really excited to hear what they have to say about how they see the Houston market, not just from a grandiose scale, but from a realistic scale. We have a fantastic moderator too, Jim Kohler, who is not just a moderator, he's a modest moderator. Past leader for the Greater Houston Partnership, and I want to just again thank you for having the conference come out to our SIOR event. If you want to learn more about SIOR, look for somebody with one of the badges or one of the lapel pins. We're fortunate to have Terry Smith, the president of the National SIOR chapter, National SIOR organization, here with us today. Also, if you want to learn more about SIOR, come see one of us, come see Terry, and we actually have a few new members. Be sure you come and introduce yourself to Terry Smith. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jim, and again, thank you for coming out.
Thanks, Don. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a lousy golf day. Jim Furr, in case you didn't know that. Tomorrow's going to be worse, and we've got a lot of events this week, so you can make yourself at home in whatever event you want to be in for the next 3 days. There's Disney out tomorrow, and ULI on Thursday, and something else on Friday, so it'll be an interesting week. Let me ask you a question before we start. Everybody in the room who is in the business in 1983, as Todd said, when this started, raise your hand. Look around. Look around. For all you young folks, it's possible to stay in the business through ups and downs. For all of us without any hair, yeah, I know, we did it. Now the question is, what do we do and how do we do it again? Because we know something else is going to happen in the future. We want to find out what that is, and we'll talk a little bit more about '83 because it was an interesting year. I'm going to give you one tidbit.
No one wants to talk about '83.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to give you one tidbit before we go into this for something to think about. 1982-83. We doubled the amount of office space in Houston in 1 year. That's the factoid. We'll talk about the rest of it later. Now I want to introduce the the panelists that we have today. Starting with the eminent David Hightower on my left. Most of you have known him for about 30 years, and if you've ever done a land deal around here, you've probably at least talked to him once or twice in that process. He's the EVP and CDO, that's Chief Development Officer for Wolf. He has been in that position and been the front person as long as I've known him, which is over 30 years. And he has done that great. He is an Aggie, though. That's the one thing that I have a problem with. But he did go to U of H and got his MBA there, so that qualifies him to be a really staunch Houstonian and also a real top developer. David was involved in 1983, and the reason I use that 83 is because I'm going to go like this is 30th year. So he was with Wolf Morgan at Part 10. If you'll go to his next one, there you go, back up one, there you go. He was at Part 10. Now when he started Part 10, most of us there were some folks in the business and in the community who said that is so far out there, it will never develop. It will never, ever develop. Well, it did, and it was pretty successful, and he's been around for 30 years doing other projects. Some of those you'll see on the screen, like Interwood. Some of the projects he's got now in the energy corridor, and he's got one way out called Gates Ranch. There's rumor that somebody saw a wolf sign just in the east suburbs of San Antonio, but I can't verify that yet. So if anybody has seen that, would you please let me know? And if he verifies it, then we'll all go over that way. He's a true visionary. Help me welcome David Hightower. Dave. Sitting to his left is Paul Lane. Anybody who worked in the downtown community for the last 20 years, or actually who has worked in the downtown community since 1980, when Hightower and Lane and I got into the business, has worked with Paul and knows that his work at Trizec and Brookfield downtown has been stellar. He's another U of H grad who went to Southwest Texas School of Law, and he's now the EVP Master Plan Communities for Howard Hughes, a position he took about a year ago. Howard Hughes, everybody knows in Houston because of his history with Houston, but Howard Hughes Corp. This time around started about a year ago. It's headquartered in Dallas. They picked up a lot of major assets around the country, including some from Rouse. They brought some other stellar folks in to help them out, and then they came down to pick up Paul. And Paul has responsibility for the Woodlands. 28,000 acres, 97,000 residents, 1,700 employees. But that's not all. He also is responsible for Bridgeland. Bridgeland's 11,400 acre master plan community. When it's built out, it'll have enough housing for 60,000 residents. In his spare time, he oversees development at Summerlin, 22,500 acre small project in Las Vegas, Nevada. Help me welcome Paul. Okay, I'm going to answer a question before it's ever asked today, and I'm going to give it to you. For those of you who are keeping score on this guy, and who's keeping score on the Woodlands, and wonder how soon it's going to be finished, let me just say that his CEO says there are plans for another 1,000 multifamily units, 2.1 million square feet of Class A office, 900 condo units, 328,000 square feet of retail, and 300 additional hotel rooms. I don't think it's going to be finished next year. Sitting to his left is Mike Merritt. Mike is a relatively new Houstonian. He's been here 5 years, got here about 5 days before the hurricane, wondered if he should go back to Michigan. He's a Michigan grad, that's a University of Michigan. He's sitting next to a Michigan State grad, and so I debated whether or not I should have a referee between the two of them, but I decided no, we could probably handle it tonight. Mike works for the global company Skanska. Most of you know Skanska is a global construction company. It's one of the top 5. It's one of the largest construction firms in the world. And it's headquartered, it has 4 business units in the United States, headquartered in New York City. It has 39 offices around the country and 9,000 employees. It has offices in New York City, Houston, Boston, DC, and recently opened in Seattle. So he has a broad perspective. This business unit is a merchant builder. They build them, lease them, sell them. Take the money they made, build them, lease them, sell them. So he's going to tell us a little bit about that. First project he's working on in Houston is 3909 Post Oak, which is right across the street. And it is one of the first office buildings in the Galleria since 1983. Actually, the late 80s when it was all finished. Williams Tower was finished, but it's one of the first office buildings to be built. Now, that's a pretty interesting stat in itself. Currently, he's got a team put together, and that team is responsible for the redevelopment of the Houston Club site downtown, if I'm not mistaken, called Capitol Tower, which there is not a picture in here, but there was one on the net. I almost grabbed it and brought it, but I didn't. And he's also found himself to be a naturalist, a conservationist, and a duck relocator on his project on the west side of town, West Memorial Place. He is in the energy corridor. And by the way, as a side, his Wolverines did make the Final Four this weekend, and we'll be in Atlanta. Let's give him my hand. Steve Jaggard, the last guy on the right over there, you may have met before because he's been here and lived here once before, and I didn't know that until I started talking to him. Keith Simon, who's the EVP and Director of Development for Coventry Development Corporation, a New York-based commercial development company. They manage and develop real estate assets, large tracts of land in Colorado, Texas, and Florida, and mixed-use developments in New York City for a private European family who purchased those assets in the 60s and the 70s. There's another answer for you. We're going to ask him a question. How can he hold them that long? He's going to tell us. He's a Michigan State graduate, as I said, best known as the lead developer of Springwoods, where Exxon lives, in their new campus. In addition to that, (385 acres). He's currently developing the rest of the 2,000 acres that will ultimately include 10,000 employees at Exxon. It will also include in that development 5,000 residential units, 8 to 9 million square feet of Class A office space for you designers in the room and contractors and leasing agents, and 1.2 million square feet of retail facilities. He's a former Houstonian. He worked here at the architectural firm of CRS, Jim Furr, and he's responsible for several other projects around the country, including a 3,500-acre project called Ridgegate in Lone Tree, Colorado. Sounds like Lone Star State or Lonesome Pine, but he is doing that. And in addition to that, they have a 100-acre MXD in Pasadena called Baybrook Eastfield, which he is beginning to develop today. Help me welcome our fourth panelist, Keith Simon. Keith. All right, that completes the introductions. Now let's get down to the brass tacks and the businesses. I want to tell you one thing before we get started. There are 2 microphones in the aisles. After the first 2 rounds or 3 rounds, please step up to the microphone. If you go to the microphone to ask someone a question, please tell us who you are and also direct that question to an individual if you can, so that we can make sure that they get tagged with, that they are able to answer it, because we want to make sure that you get the right answer today. Does everybody, anything else you guys on the panel need? Here we go. All right. New kid on the block. Here we go. Keith, welcome back to Houston. 50 years since that site was bought, until you announced the Exxon campus and the rest of the development plan for that site. How does Coventry have that kind of holding power, patience, and what do you look for in developments that you're doing?
Well, first I'd like to just thank you all for inviting me here today. I'm here quite frequently now. I did live here many moons ago, and I'm happy to be back with the Springwoods Village project. It is pretty unusual, isn't it, Jim? Our patience really comes from our principal and client, whose father bought all these assets in the Houston area in 1961. The Springwoods Village property, some land at the southern end of the Texas Medical Center, and some land down around what's now the Baybrook Mall area. And when they bought it principally as a hedge against the unknowns of socialism in Europe. No intention of development land here. Paid cash, never have had any debt on it, still don't. And that allows for a lot of patience. Now, what do we look for in the developments? I mean, maybe you mean, when do we finally decide to start them after all those many years of patience? And frankly, it takes some coaxing because, on the one hand, making decisions to move ahead is a bit of a risk for them, and they're very risk averse. But a lot of times it's just kind of an undeniable time to start. And for us, the way we start these master plan communities, and by the way, we really believe in the master plan community. I think the Woodlands has certainly proven and made really a great precedent to prove up the value of the master plan community in the suburban ring of the urban area. So we couldn't do what we're doing without what they've done. We certainly appreciate that. We started when we have a big employer to become the engine to drive the rest of the project. That's what happened in our Colorado project. We had a major regional medical center, an HCA regional medical center and hospital. And for Springwoods Village, the engine is ExxonMobil campus. I kind of liken it to a sports car versus a big car. The Colorado project is more of a luxury car with a pretty good engine in it. But Springwoods Village is more like the Ferrari. It's a little less land with a much bigger engine.
Great. Thanks, Keith. Second question, Mike. What's the strategy that Skanska used that led you to Houston? How'd you get here?
Well, that's an interesting story. I was part of a travel assignment and worked out in New York. And in our model, Skanska is a global leader in delivery of construction service. But Jim talked about related business units, which is infrastructure development, residential development, commercial, which is the area I was focused on. Our commercial development unit has been around in the Nordics and Central Europe for more than 30 years and millions of square feet. I'm not even sure how much they've developed. And I got tagged to be part of that travel assignment studying the States. The way the assignment works is if you were to fly a bird's eye view looking down on the States, where would you plant a flag to look for opportunities of investment? And the criteria is co-locating where Skanska already offices. And the purpose of that is Skanska will be our build solution, so we will always partner with Skanska in our projects. What's great about our formula is that when Skanska finds an opportunity for investment, like Keith had talked in Coventry, we do ours without debt as well. So we have 39 cities, and I visited 10 or 12 of them. I happened to move from Michigan. There's 2 cities there, did not get a visit from us, and that summed up.
Mike, pull your mic up just a little closer, Mike. Mike.
So we proposed on 3 initial cities, which was Boston, D.C., Houston, with headquarters in New York. And as Jim said, just a year after that, we added Seattle to our market. In my group, I had someone that did real estate in his former life, and family lived in D.C., so perfect choice for him. And my choice was to go to New York and end up with a divorce, or Boston or Houston. And I'm ever so glad that Houston was my journey. It's been a fantastic journey for me. Because when I got here, I realized and learned what the business community was like here. It's very open, very friendly, very easy to take meetings with people. People have very helpful, and it's been a real blessing for me working here. So I've been blessed in my travels to get to Houston.
Great.
And I guess you saved your marriage.
And we did save our marriage. Thank you for that one, Paul.
Paul, next question for you. I'm going to go down the line just so you guys can anticipate where I'm headed. Paul, what's the biggest difference you found between doing buildings downtown and going out to a master plan community like the Woodlands, which is already pretty much underway, and taking that responsibility on, and then having Bridgelands and also the activity in Las Vegas? What's the difference?
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for the opportunity of being here. It was really a complete change for me. I mean, after almost 30 years downtown, basically my prior life was our publicly traded real estate companies would buy 50-story or 55-story, 60-story buildings. We would buy them, lease them, and either sell them or create value for our shareholders. And we do that kind of all over the country. And for a lot of years, I had 4 or 5 different cities that I was doing that in. This is with Howard Hughes as parent company, the Woodlands Development Company, very entrepreneurial. It's very development oriented rather than owning and managing particular office buildings. So we're building not only office buildings but also retail centers, hotels, and multifamily apartments. Frankly, just as fast as we possibly can. And so it's a whole new kind of creative lease on life, for me. The Woodlands development team has been there for 38 years, phenomenal infrastructure with the company. I mean, it is a controlled, extremely polite monopoly that Mr. Mitchell set up 38 years ago, and he was brilliant when he did it. And I mean monopoly as a positive term, not as a negative term. So we have, I think by the end of the year, we may have 600 or 700, maybe $800 million of stuff under construction.
Wow, that's a big difference. That is quick. David, before I come to you, see, I want to take a U-turn for just a minute. I want to ask the two guys on the end, Keith and Mike, what's the biggest surprise you guys got when you came to Houston and started to work in this market? Keith, why don't you go first?
Okay, sure. Well, it's not really a surprise, but the lack of zoning is quite refreshing coming from Colorado and Florida projects. So that was certainly pretty nice. I think probably the biggest surprise for me was the level of advancement in LEED sustainable commercial buildings in Houston. I really didn't know that you guys were that far along. I just sort of had a perception that maybe you weren't. And frankly, I think Houston's a lot further along in the commercial sustainability than Denver is.
Great. Mike?
Well, same experience that Keith talked about. I came from communities where I served on planning and zoning, and so they had a sense of logic of how you develop in a community, or at least where you go to develop communities. And here that was absent, so it was a bit of a learning curve to figure out how, what, and why. On top of that, the traffic as it moves through Houston. Mind you, my first 2 days, my second day was after Hurricane Ike, so power was out everywhere and street lights were one at a time crawling through, and I was thinking, I'm going to spend my years aging in my car. Trying to avoid that. Still money. So learning zoning and planning was huge. Learning traffic and mobility in Texas, or Houston rather, was big. And then the third one I'd say is, from the outside, I didn't have an impression of Houston, but when I got here, it dawned on me, or I realized the wide diversity Houston has. And I think that's one of its rich assets going forward. So you probably all know the 100 languages and 93 consulates. I heard an HR person at one of the major energy company talk about diversity being the solution for Houston's future. And as we look at our city as now becoming an international city, we are reflecting that same image of back to the world. I think that's a big step forward.
Great. Thank you, Mike. David.
Jim.
The rest of the country's still mired in a recession. We came roaring out. We're bringing on jobs at the fastest rate in the country in this market. We're at 4.5% year over year as of the end of February. In 87, 89, 90, 91, and 92, we were at 5%. So we're growing almost as rapidly as we did in what we consider to be one of the highest growth periods in our history. Why? What's different this time? What's different with the growth curve, and what does that mean for your projects when you look at them?
Energy. I mean, let's face it, the energy business is still the gorilla in this community that drives a great deal of consumption of space, of man hours, of materials. And so, in fact, I was talking with a friend of mine the other day. I wish I had the time to go back and do the analysis. It would be interesting to see what the job creation in the United States has truly been over the last 4 years if you took out the energy component. I really don't want to see the answer to that. We are blessed, not just Houston, but Texas in general, to have to be the still be the energy capital of the world, and the energy state, the only non-OPEC country in the Western Hemisphere, northern half of the Western Hemisphere. I keep forgetting Venezuela. So that, coupled with a number of things, Texas is still, and hopefully will continue to be, a very business-friendly state, aggressively courting business, as evidenced by our governor's multiple trips to California to try to get companies to relocate here. We still have a real entrepreneurial mindset in this community. In Houston in particular, as compared to maybe Dallas and Austin, where it's a real can-do. It's not a who do you know, but what can you do, and as long as you produce, then people will support you and help you get things accomplished. We have relatively light regulations compared to a lot of cities with zoning and overlay regulations, like the Coastal Commission in California. It's not to say that we're totally unregulated. We do have an awful lot of development controls, but they're much more reasonable, much less onerous in terms of time consuming and working through them. That is something that we as an industry need to keep mindful of and keep an eye on, because we could find ourselves drifting into a more and more regulated environment, which would not necessarily be a good thing for our competitiveness. We are still a relatively clean political business in which to do environment in which to do business. And by that I mean, generally speaking, you just don't have the same amount of political patronage and other issues that you have to deal with to put a project through the approvals process here. But in some cities in the country, you don't apply for a building permit, you buy a building permit. You pay several different people to get it. So still we're very clean in that regard. And I think also we're recognized as a world-class city. We have worldwide connections. We have, I forget the number, Mike mentioned the number of consulates and languages spoken in this country. And we're very open to newcomers who come in and want to contribute to our community. So I think we got an awful lot of things going for us. We have to be mindful that we don't let some of the negativity that's in some of the other markets creep into this market. So we have to be vigilant in that regard. But every day I wake up, and as Jim Good says, I thank my lucky stars. I'm in Texas, Houston in particular.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, of course.
Let me just tack on to that great soliloquy that my friend to my right just said. The additional thing to think about, and if you guys are not calling on companies around the country to move to Houston, you should. One of the new things since I, am working out in the Woodlands, different than downtown, like 62% of the new tenants that have moved to the Woodlands came from not only out of Houston, but out of state. A group called Waste Connections moved from Napa Valley. Can you imagine moving from Napa Valley? But it wasn't because they really wanted to, because they loved the lifestyle, but they were taxed to death. And their business climate was just hammered. It wasn't only personal income tax, it was state income tax, it was corporate income tax. I mean, it was just on and on and on. They realized they had to leave. We just got a company, well, several companies from around the country that have looked at Houston, and they decided on the Woodlands, but they couldn't decide on any part of the city because the tax environment is so favorable here, and all the other elements of doing business that David just mentioned. This is such an easy place to do business and a cheap place to do business, and we've got a phenomenal workforce to hire from. So our company, we are actually starting an ad campaign in all the cities that our governor started pitching about Texas. So we're just going to follow them up and advertise about Houston and about the Woodlands, and move your company here. We're a tax almost a tax-free zone. So there's lots of opportunities here. So when you're looking for business, don't just look down the street. Think about the markets that have the highest taxes and the people that have moved here. I mean, Exxon is moving, I don't know, 10,000, I don't know, thousands of people. They never will admit how many, from Fairfax to Virginia and from Ohio. And there'll be a lot more people coming here, and you'll be able to see it on our freeways.
Great. Paul, let me just follow behind you. If that's the case, then you must have a lot of things in your pocket, like I said before. What's the? We saw 3 new announcements yesterday up in your backyard.
Well, you know, we've been trying to listen to our customer base to figure out what it is we need, and multifamily is easy. I mean, we have almost 800 units, multifamily units under construction, both in our town center at Millennium 2, and then we're starting right in the next 120 days, a 400-unit complex on Lake Woodlands, which is a new development we're calling Hughes Landing, which a year ago it was 66 acres of pine trees on Lake Woodlands, and it's really been fun to work with some great architects like Gensler, who's in the audience, and others to design a fabulous mixed-use development with great office. We can do 2 million feet of office, and we're doing 170,000 feet of retail, hotels, and multifamily, and it's all right on the lake. It just expands that Woodlands kind of way of life, which if you had told me when I got a call from the CEO about 14 months ago what the Woodlands way of life was, I had no clue. I mean, I'd gone into Carlton Woods to play golf, which is a country club, 36 holes of great golf, which we actually own, but I had no clue. And if you don't know what the Woodlands is all about, if you have a client or a customer who either wants to, you know, lease office space, or we can do a build-a-suit. This is an unabashed advertisement, obviously. You know,
sounds like it.
Well, that is the
I'm
business.
Paul Reagan, I paid for this.
That's right. Keith is listening very closely.
I think this is what the 4 of us do, right? We build stuff.
I'd like you to get that Woodlands built out sooner rather than later, so I'm all for it.
I thought you just wanted people to quit saying Exxon was in the Woodlands.
Yeah.
That too.
We keep finding land to build stuff on, so you know it'll be a great friendly competition with you down the road, and we can talk about
co-opetition. You guys are going to cooperate and build out up there.
Absolutely.
Let me move on. I've got 135 questions. You know, one of the ways to get questions is to ask the speakers what they would ask the other guys. It was 135 questions, so I really want to get through a couple of them here before we run out of time. Steve, is that all right with you? Okay. Let me move. Speaking of other cities, Mike, your global team was here in the last month or two. And they traveled all over the country talking about real estate and what's going on in construction. What did they think when they came to town about this market, and what are lessons that we can learn from that based on what they've seen in other places around the U.S. and Europe?
Sure. In the last month, I've had 2 visits from our CEO, the president, and 4 of what we call SET, which stands for Skanska Executive Team. So when you talk about all eyes on Texas, I think you could say Skanska has eyes on Texas. While they were here, and of course I work in the business unit of commercial development, that's the story I want to talk about, but it's much bigger than that, really, quite honestly. We have the buildings unit here, and there's so much things going on inside and beyond commercial development, so it's what's happening at the medical center, our large industrial base, the port, and others, and what we're doing here in commercial development, so the metrics that were there. So when I was talking with the executives in Skanska, I used the term about a perfect storm, which in my mind, in my eyes, was all about prosperity and opportunity. So you all know it. We are enjoying it here. We're probably one of the best cities to be in right now. We're blessed with jobs and population growth. Behind that is quality of life and affordability issues. blessed with a large and diverse economy. So David's absolutely right, it's energy, but it doesn't stop there. It's our medical complex, it's our industrial complex, it's our Port of Houston, and then the third part of the perfect storm that I played to them was the expansion of the Panama Canal, which in one presentation someone presented it as a BFD. It's a big financial deal. And so as Houston...
Thank you, Mr. Biden.
As Houston grows out their industrial base and the pipeline system from shale, and if should Keystone it will improve, create transportation here. The cargo load that comes in and out of the Gulf, and Houston is the prime shipping channel for that. It's only prime for future growth. So now back to how scans can view Houston. They're hot on Houston for our opportunities on growth, for commercial use, for industrial use, for medical. And when I compare this to, at least in the U.S., because I compete with the other cities, while I said it's a program that we don't seek debt, we self-finance, there's a stiff competition for funding, right? And so we're in Seattle, which has home to the IT, and we're competing with Boston in research, and of course DC, the seat of government and nothing happened action. But none of those communities, in my mind, in my view, can operate if they don't have energy. And we're solving it here. We're solving it with IT and the way they go about exploration. We're solving it here with EMP, shale, and what is a game changer there, and why the energy industry is seeing us as the U.S. becoming independent or an exporter of resources. That's going to be a huge game changer. And so Skanska's view on not just Houston, but really Texas, they want to see more opportunities, and I think I hope they come here in a very big way. It's exciting for us.
Great, thank you, Mike. David?
It's only energy, because it's not. As Mike said, you know, healthcare is an incredible growth industry. It was even before they call it the Affordable Care Act. Thank you. The intellectual property business, software, and other related is huge in Houston. But Houston doesn't get the same recognition as you know, the Bay Area or even Austin in that regard. But when you look at the combination of engineering and computer science talent in this city, combined with the energy business and other support industries, the talent, the education, the educated talent workforce we have in the city is phenomenal. And a lot of companies are really searching for that. The people were all worried about what's going to happen with NASA, and NASA has had a lot of cutbacks, but the energy companies are really aggressively trying to tap that labor market, because these are very highly educated people. I think there's been 2 articles recently, one about BP and one about Total. 2 of the largest computers in the world are located or about to be located in the energy core. And it takes a lot of software talent to operate and maintain that kind of equipment. And from that then spins off companies that serve those companies. So it's, you know, we're breeding an awful lot of small companies. I have classmates who are now retiring from these big energy companies, and they're turning right around and they're consulting for the energy companies and doing very well with it. So it's an incredible economy that energy is obviously a significant component to, but there's all sorts of other businesses in this community that are just growing like wildfire.
Great. David, Keith, let me ask you a question. You said a while ago that you were surprised by the green movement down here and how many LEED buildings there were. What do you do in your projects for sustainability? How do you address that issue when you, for instance, at Ridgegate and some of the other projects you've worked on, how do you address that issue of sustainability when you're doing a master plan community?
So when we put together the master plan community, we first go and get the engine, and then we build the car around it, basically the master plan. And it's typically a vision for a mixed-use, walkable type of community. We think that's what's going to be appealing over the next couple of decades to the younger generations in particular.
And we think that, you know, those kind of communities are becoming very appealing to these corporations that choose to embed their facilities and campuses in a master plan community. You can see more and more of that coming. So in terms of sustainability, then what we do is we've got a plan, we've got an engine, we've got a plan, then we create a set of development standards and guidelines, basically the rules of how you have to behave if you get to buy land here in this community. And in Springwoods Village case, they're pretty stringent. They require a LEED Gold certification for commercial buildings, and for residential, they require basically the equivalent of that, which is real. You know, the first is not that big of a push for Houston because, as I said, you guys are so advanced. But to push the residential merchant home builders to achieve those kind of levels in Houston has never been done before, and we're having fun doing it.
David, you look like you want to say something about that issue.
Well, I think that,
Especially in the industrial side, if you have a comment that would help.
well, there are 100 people in this audience that can speak to the sustainability of in industrial buildings much better than I can. But what I have been told is that it's much harder to pencil that in industrial buildings, but the clients are beginning to drive it. I mean, eventually that's what happens. The client says, you know, I've got to check off in my annual report that we've reached a certain degree of sustainability. That means warehouses, not just office buildings. One of the challenges that we in this business, and particularly we that do large-scale land development projects, need to start looking at is sustainability in terms of the land development component. And I think a lot of that was driven home in the last phase of the drought that we're in, and it was a phase. We're about to go back into it again. I think we'll be in extreme drought condition in southeast Texas before June. And so our use of water for extensive landscaping and other things is something that we're going to, as an industry, need to be rethinking. And for those of us who try to create our woodlands effect down on the rice prairies and aren't blessed with the trees that Paul has, we need to come up with a better mousetrap.
Don't do it. In Bridgeland, for instance, in northwest Houston, during the drought, to keep all those lakes are great, but it cost us $800,000 to keep those lakes full.
That's not sustainable.
Water, yeah.
That's not sustainable. So we need to rethink the exterior built environment, if you will, not just the glazing on the building, the roof, and the light fixture. But we need to think through the exterior landscaping. How do we landscape parking lots in a much more less water intensive manner?
I think that's a really good point, David. And we are doing that with Springwoods Village. We're using low-impact design approach for all the stormwater management, very drought-tolerant native type of plant mix. But it's really a sea change in what people are going to see. You know, they're not going to see the big rolling lawns of bluegrass, and it takes a little getting used to. We did that in our project in Colorado 10 years ago, and you know, it takes some patience to see those little native plants grow. You know, they're little and they grow over some
Especially
time.
in a major drought.
Exactly. So you got to really be committed to it, and you got to be able to, you know, deal with the complaints and criticisms that you get. But you know, again, we have a lot of patience, so we think we can get there. But the net effect of that is really important when you combine it with the building sustainability.
Paul, you have a comment you want to make on that issue? Is that right?
You know, in Bridgeland, so it's 11,000 acres in northwest Houston. The new toll roads that cut right through the middle of it. We are going through now and redesigning our landscape to be more water efficient. You know, it's just, you're right. I mean, you know, it looks great, but between the landscaping costs and the watering costs, you know, I mean, we're selling a lot of lots to builders, and it's, you know, we do have plans for a town center and lots of other exciting retail, but it'll be years in the future. So,
Mike, you guys have the Empire State Building in New York City, right?
Right.
First platinum building.
Sure. Let me.
And how does that relate back to what you're doing in Houston?
In a big way. So, Skanska is a Swedish-based, publicly traded company and influenced by the Scandinavian background. And a lot of our design influence is based on knowledge that we gained from Europe and Scandinavia. In my world, Skanska has part of our core values, 5 zeros. It's zero ethical breaches, zero safety incidents. One of them is zero environmental, and that means across the board. So it's not just for buildings, for lane diversion of waste. It's what we do in our projects. And Skanska truly walks the walk and talks the talk. So when I go through our process for request of funding approval, if it wasn't LEED Gold and I get looked down on if it was LEED Gold, there's simply no chance of getting approval. You got to go back and figure it out. At the Empire State Building, we were a tenant in the building on 2 floors, and we let our space as a tenant interior for a LEED Platinum. Think about that. The building was built during the Depression in the 20s and 30s, right? How a building then, now 70, 80 years later, can be adapted to LEED Platinum, but we did. And because we did that, the owner of the Empire State Building did his things, and part of what we had to do is get him to raise the bar on different things like cleaning standards and fluids and recyclables and a lot of other things, but he went forward and replaced windows in the building. And I think he had to match historical era of it, but do it in a manner that was LEED sustainable. I mean, efficiency for energy, I meant to say. And we think at Skanska, it's just the right and responsible thing. We all work in the built environment. The built environment contributes, I think, 70% to our energy demand globally. We all have a responsibility. So the things that David talked about, Keith and Paul, protecting our resources and being responsible for the built environment is an important factor. Skanska holds that value very high.
It's impressive that you would do that, because we're doing it because we don't want to spend so much. I mean, you're spending the money on purpose.
Well, but we do life cycle studies on that. So instead of a low first cost entry into a building, we'll do 15 to 20 year modeling over energy savings against upfront investments. We think it's the right thing to do. It does cost more. I can change our investment with low cost entry. But we think it'll attract the right tenants, and we think that the investor climate will certainly want it. Here's a good question for you. 2013, 6 years ago, people were struggling over should we do LEED or LEED or not. And I think today LEED is just a basic standard of building standards, right, for permit. It's always going to push the bar. And what was LEED Silver will soon be old standards. We at Skanska have what's called a color palette, and it goes from vanilla to deep green, but it's our journey to deep green. And I'm proud to say at Post Oak we got pre-certified as LEED Platinum. We'll see how the certification ends up. But on our color palette, from vanilla to deep green, we're somewhere in the middle with a LEED Platinum building. We're always going to push the bar to improve.
But you guys, you're merchant builders? I mean, you're building and selling?
Yeah, we're merchant builders.
And you think that you are getting back all the money, rather, going from silver to platinum is a huge cost differential. Do you think you're achieving that?
I think so. It is a cost increase. I'm not going to deny that. But I think there's a misnomer about that, Paul. To go from silver to gold means you just need to get the points beyond silver to get into gold. The really hard work is finding all the solutions for today. It's energy savings in the LEED scoring system. How you can solve all of the gold points and then get into platinum. That's where it really drives it. Even if in Houston, I've always said it has a regional barrier problem, so it's our heat, humidity, location, climate, etc. Even if I end up in the high LEED gold, it will always be for reasons of getting every energy savings and every energy point we can. It's just the right thing to do. And I think...
Well, and Skanska pushes too, Paul. You got to understand that they're in Europe with the green standard, which is much higher than what we have in the LEED standard. And that's moving this way. And so they're already there and comfortable with that, so they're going to push Mike.
Right. But
really,
I'm just saying, as a merchant builder...
Yeah, the waterfall waterfall shows the return.
Yeah, I mean, you're just going to build, you're going to
or you wouldn't build it.
Build and sell.
Yeah.
You know, build and sell, build and sell. I mean, why not build silver if the cost differential to go to platinum, and you're right, it's not that much more to go to gold, but you know, if you can't get your money out on your exit, it's just a fascinating structure. It's your company's, you know, perspective, and you know,
it's a dilemma. It's one of our dilemmas. Okay, I agree with that.
It's certainly a challenge, but I'll say it again, if you look back just 6 years to today,
yeah.
If you're selling something in 2018 and you don't look forward to what that market wants to be like, you will be behind.
Now, we started about 3 to 5 minutes late. If you give us 3 to 5 minutes, I'll do this. If anybody has a question that they want to ask these guys, I'll take a couple of questions from the floor before we go to the finals. Anybody have one that they just got to ask? If you do, step up to the mic. Going once, going twice. I know, yes, sir. You got to step up to the bar. Go up to the mic so we can hear you. Please, tell us who you are.
I'm Howard Wilson. I've been in the commercial business for a lot of years, but I'm sort of not in it anymore. My question to you is, Mike, you're involved in literally a worldwide international company. One of the things I've not heard about from you or others out there, and I'm asking the question to you, is education. How is our workforce competing not only locally for attracting businesses, but internationally? I'm concerned that we have a problem, not just for this country, but particularly for the Houston area, and I'd like your comments on that.
Short, please, because that's a 3-hour session, as you well know. We've gone through that one before.
We design our buildings to attract and retain employees. Everyone here does. It's nothing new and nothing you haven't heard before. It is one of our biggest challenge. And I said earlier about listening to an HR person from an energy company. The words she had used was, we're at war in competition for talent. In Houston, we're blessed because the large energy companies have brought and relocated people to Houston. And you've seen several of those stories. Exxon, I heard from Keith, but there are others, and many of you already know about that. Our challenge here will be how we're going to maintain an educated workforce. But here's a great thing about Houston. One of the things I've learned since being here. This is a huge philanthropic community. I say that because it starts with the well-endowed, and they do excellent things in the community. But as a city, we passed 3 bonds in the last election that are worth more than $2.5 billion. The biggest of which was investment in education. And we really have to put our money there. The others were in parks and recreation, plus mobility, equally important things. But a threat I've heard from GHP is if we can no longer attract new talent, we're going to slide backwards. We always have to be out there and push the bar. And in Skanska, I have 2 Swedes that relocated to Houston to work here. In big companies, you can do that, and I see we're going to draw from talent around the world, including the University of Michigan.
What about Michigan State?
That's
I'm sorry, Keith's job. Paul, go ahead.
You know what I was going to just to follow up on that. I think one of the really incredible resources here in the Houston area is Lone Star Community College. They've done a fantastic job at being extremely entrepreneurial. Paul, you can probably back this up, particularly up in northwest Houston, with their facilities and specific training for companies, and even leasing some of their space in their campus to a company to do very detailed, focused training for their employees. So in a lot of ways, it's the extra training and retraining of people that's as important as the initial base education that the college grads are getting.
Yeah, I mean, there are some great stories on education in Houston, such as Rice, obviously, University of Houston, some of the great programs they're doing, University of St. Thomas, Lone Star. But when you look at the elementary and junior high and high school for HISD, it's statistically, it's one of the worst, certainly in the Southwest. But the graduation rates, I mean, whatever metric you want to use, and it's something that the bond issues that'll help throwing money at it, but it needs a total rework, and it's really sad because of how all of us have chosen where we live when our kids were little about what school they were going to go to, either private or public. There's some great private programs like Cristo Rey Jesuit that are helping change the poorest of the poor but bright kids in the city, but we've got a long way to go. So I think education and traffic are probably the two major issues that our city is going to have to figure out. We have 100,000 people moving here a year, plus all the undocumented that are moving who are they're coming here and they're still driving cars. Our freeways are filling up. You guys have noticed it in the last year. Freeways are worse. Mass transit is marginal. So,
here we go. Hey, Stoddard, the guy with the camera over there is my partner at constructioncitizens.com, and he gets on me all the time because I'm really hot about robot cars. And Elizabeth's one of our writers down here, an editor, and because of the impact of what robotic cars could do, driverless cars, but robotic cars could do for us in terms of solving this problem. It's a technological solution to an issue that we're dealing with down here more than anywhere else in the country. We don't have to go to any clean fuels. We don't have to do any of that. We just have to have some way to go out to our car and go wherever we want to go without having to go like we do now. So I get a kick out of that, and I apologize for putting that in there, but it's one of the things that we write about on Construction Citizen, even though we talk about construction a lot, and this issue of education and the issue of the skilled workforce is one of the biggest issues that we have on that blog. We've been doing that for the last 2 years, and I hope you'll sign up out in the lobby for that. Also, by the way, if you do, we have an iPad mini we're going to give away this week, so if you put your business card in there, we'll get that for you.
I just want to tell you, I mean, I've lived in Westview for 30 years, and David's there too, and we drive out, right, and you're going against traffic. I had lived in a bubble for 30 years just driving from Westview to downtown, no traffic, Now, driving north and, in the mornings, you see this bumper-to-bumper traffic, and it is unbelievable. And my eyes have definitely been open in the last year. The people that drive an hour and 15 minutes every day each way, and it's only getting worse.
50 miles.
Yeah.
50 miles each way.
It's going to crush.
50 miles in, 50 miles out, and I know that half the audience probably does that every day.
But I tell you, it's going to crush our city, or it's going to push us into pods, right, where you want to live by where you work, and ideally, you'd be able to walk to work like you can in the Woodlands or some other places. So.
Yeah, good point. Springwoods, Keith would say, is one of those places as well. Okay, look, I want to do a speed round real quick, and I appreciate your patience. I want to know, we're sitting here today in a situation where we're tracking 75 office buildings that are at various stages of development, not including multifamily, not including all the residential. How long is this cycle going to last? And I'd like one answer from each one of you about how long you think it's going to be around this time. David Hightower, how long will this cycle last? The boom, as we say. How long will it last?
Well,
No wells. Give me a number. I'm sorry.
He doesn't work that way.
I know he doesn't. That's the reason why. But he is an engineer, even though he is an Aggie. He can put a number out there.
2017.
2017, okay. Paul?
3 years.
3 years, 2016. Lou? Mike?
I talked about the perfect storm, and I compared it to my experience growing up in Michigan, which had the robust growth from the 50s to the late 80s. I see it's I see it's longer vision than that.
Okay.
So the short one
Give
would
us a
be
number.
17, but
2007.
the long vision is 25 years.
Okay. All right. Keith?
Get her done. I say booming for 7 years to 2020 and then continuing at a maybe lesser pace.
Great. Okay. All right. Now, I want to do this because I want to clean up here. I want to thank everybody on the panel for your time today because you've given us some great information. And I'd like to thank everybody in here for what you do in the business and for being a great audience today. I am told that the exhibits are open and so is the bar. Thank you very much for being here today. Have a great week.